Call the Honourable Minister Stephen Joyce.
Mr Chair, the member opposite should actually not let facts get in the way of a good story, and he obviously doesn't. Because firstly, Mr Speaker, you can still borrow on a student loan if you're over 55. You can borrow for fees for courses if you're over 55. You can't borrow for living costs, and there's a reason for that because once people are past 55, the taxpayers end up writing off over 70% of student loans. So we thought, well, how do we strike a balance here? Because yes, we do want to have people of that age upskilling, but we also have to acknowledge they don't have as much time to repay their student loans, which is the contract, of course, with the taxpayer at that age. So we thought, well, let's have a bit of balance here. Let's have borrowing for fees, but not for living costs. And that's actually what we're doing. So the member's made his first mistake there. His second mistake was talking about compulsory course costs for part-time students, because, of course, part-year students have never been able to get compulsory course costs from the fees component. We have changed it for full-year students to ensure consistency, but of course they can still borrow for fees as well. So once again, the facts get in the way of a good story. But Mr Speaker, Mr Chair, the really good story here is the work the Tertiary Education Commission has done, and I salute the TEC for the work they have done for improving the outcomes from our very large tertiary education spend, which across student support and fees and tuition subsidies is over $4 billion. They've had a real focus on value for money, and the evidence in terms of outcomes is very impressive indeed. This year, Mr Chair, we will have the highest number of full-time equivalent students ever in New Zealand universities this year. It's a tremendous outcome. We also have the highest number of core places, full-time core places at universities, polytechnics, wānanga, right across the public tertiary sector, Mr Chair, 16,500 more than 3 years ago when the previous crowd left government. But overall, our expenditure has not gone up because we've got better value for money, Mr Chair. We've also this year got more PTE places, 750 more. The previous government froze those in about 2002. We have lifted that this year. We have more opportunities for New Zealanders right across the board, Mr Chair, and including more places at higher levels on the spectrum of qualifications. We've also managed to achieve better results out of industry training, Mr Chair, and that is actually a horror story from the previous government, an absolute horror story. They trebled the industry training budget over 10 years. They did not ensure accountability for the funding. They did not ensure that there was any accountability at all. And as a result, we discovered the TEC audited industry training in 2008 and 2009 and found that 44% of trainees were not earning credits over that 2-year period. The Labor Party's phantom industry trainees had disappeared off the scene. There were some that hadn't had training agreements signed. There were some that actually weren't employed by the companies that they're supposed to have been employed by and getting industry training in. And there were even a dozen that were deceased, Mr Chair. They were deceased, and the previous government had not noticed that. And so what we've done, Mr Chair, is we have actually put a much more reasonable amount of industry training budget in. We've cut it back a bit. And you know what? We're going to get better results out of industry training with a less budget than they managed to achieve, because they are the crowd, as I think Dr Mapp said, that just likes to get the bucket of money and just keep tipping it in the front and not thinking for a moment what the accountabilities are at the back end. It's right across the public sector when we arrive, and Mr Chair, we are sorting it out. We're also sorting out a number of other areas. Now, I think adult and community education is very important, but like Mrs Tolley, I'm not sure at all that the government and taxpayers should be paying for people to do their hobbies, Mr Chair. And so what we have done is refocus ACE on literacy, numeracy, ESOL and the Māori language. And I'm very, very proud of that, Mr Chair. And there's no doubt that people can actually take up their opportunities with adult and community education. And finally, Mr Chair, in the limited time I have available, again, the excellent job that the TEC is doing is I've managed to come up with additional funding over the next 4 years for ESOL, Mr Chair. $17.5 million. Hasn't been talked about a lot, but it's going to be good for migrants. It's going to make a real difference to refugees in this country. This government cares. This government is focused on getting real value for money out of tertiary education, and we're doing that, and the previous crowd just couldn't get off their backsides long enough to check what was going on.
I call the